Hi folks, well it's been just over a week and a half now since the CFL had its major announcement press conference, bringing in the biggest changes to the league since the US expansion back in the 90s. For those of you who don't know, the changes are going to be implemented in two phases, the first coming in 2026 and involving a 35-second automatic play clock, teams needing to be on opposite sidelines, and modifying the rouge. While in 2027 the changes include shrinking the field, moving the goalpost, and shrinking the end zones. It really doesn't matter what I say, but when the marquee star of the league and Nathan Rourke is calling the changes garbage, they're probably pretty bad. I'll start with the one change I agree with, teams needing to be on opposite sidelines. It's already like that in I think about half of the stadiums, with BC and a handful of the Eastern teams being the only exceptions. It should have been implemented decades ago, and I'm really not sure why it wasn't. I worry that the new automatic 35-second play clock will potentially kill the last 3 minutes of a CFL game. As I'm sure most of you know, the last 3 minutes of a CFL game can be some of the most exciting 3 minutes in sports, especially come playoff time. Because it's the CFL, anything can happen. But instead of having edge of your seat excitement, most fans will be walking to the turnstiles as the players start shaking hands with about a minute and a half left. One thing I've never liked about American football, and I can't understand why they're bringing it to the CFL. My least favorite of the changes in 2026 is modifying the rouge. Let's be real. It's not a modification, it's a killing of the rouge. Well, the rouge will still be there, but it will no longer be able to be awarded on a punt that goes through the back of the end zone or a missed field goal. The only way a rouge will be able to be awarded now is if the kick returner fails to advance the ball out of the end zone or voluntarily concedes the point. I find you either love the rouge or you hate it, but you have to agree that it's the most famous Canadian football rule. Even people who don't know the CFL know about the rouge. People say it awards failure. I disagree, because the kicking team only gets 1 point as opposed to 3. In reality, it rewards defensive failure, because the defense could have let up 3 points, 6 points, 7 points, or even 8 points. But they got rewarded for playing bad defense and allowing the offensive team into the range to even consider kicking. Honestly hopes this year's Grey Cup is decided off a rouge, because what a quintessentially Canadian ending for the great Canadian rule. Now for the 2027 changes. If it was just shrinking the end zones, I'd grit my teeth, but ultimately I would be fine with it. And I say this as someone who has season tickets in the end zone. Yes, it would be a little further away, but ultimately, like I said, I would be fine with it. And the primary reason for that is because they've shrunk it before. In 1986, because the then relatively new BC place could only accommodate a 20-yard end zone instead of the then standard 25, the rest of the league decided to adopt the 20-yard end zone as the new standard. It's been that way for almost 40 years now, and it's been the only end zone dimensions I've known, and I'm sure it's the only end zone dimensions a lot of the people watching have known. I don't like moving the goalpost from the front of the end zone to the back. Now they claim it's for 2 reasons. Because it's an obstruction and for player safety. I don't think any players actually gotten hurt because they ran into the goalpost. It's padded for a reason and they all know it's there. But an obstruction? Cody Fajardo's not out there every game. 2019 West Finals, thank you very much. Well, if it's an obstruction going towards the other team's end zone, how could you miss the big, bright yellow post? They're pretty hard to miss, and if you hit them, that's probably because you didn't have the greatest read. Whereas, if you're throwing from behind them, well, you're probably stuck back there because your offensive line is Swiss cheese. I could count more punts hitting the scoreboard at BC Place and balls hitting the goalpost recently. But yeah, apparently only one of those is an issue. But the change I really hate, and hate's a light word, is the shrinking of the Canadian field from 110 yards long to 100 yards long. To me, this screams, we want to Americanize. And further proof, to me at least, of that is when asked if there are any sacred Canadian rules, the commissioner essentially said no. So I want to know how much longer until they take the yard off the ball out, 12th man out, the waggle out, the 65-yard width of the field out, and the 3 downs out. Because at that point you might as well rename it NFL Light. These changes to me reek of desperation. In reality, I don't think it would work. I don't think there's anyone who'll be like, I wasn't gonna watch this. Oh, but they shrunk the field. I'll give it a chance now. That's not going to happen. In particular, I think these changes are trying to appease the general Toronto sports market. Because whether fair or not, me and a lot of us as CFL fans have had the feeling that Toronto looks down their noses at the league. That it's some sort of low-class entertainment that only a prairie bumpkin would enjoy. Toronto hasn't cared about the Argos since the days of Rocket Ishmael, John Candy, Wayne Gretzky, and Bruce McNall in 91 and 92. In reality, the problem Toronto has isn't because they view it as some sort of lower league. It's because Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment refuses to market them properly. They're too focused on marketing the Bills, a team from a completely different league and a completely different country, over the oldest operating professional sports club in North America, a homegrown option. It's not like Toronto hasn't had great players to market since the Rocket. They've had Flutie, Pinball Clemens, Damon Allen, Chad Owens, and Chad Kelly. They're still playing to mostly empty seats every game. It's not just the Toronto marketing problem. Overall, the CFL has a marketing problem in almost every market besides Winnipeg and Saskatchewan, because those two teams are woven directly into the community. You have people going to Bomber games who don't even care about football, but they get this social pass and get plastered at the Rum Hut. That's why Winnipeg and Saskatchewan are the crown jewels of the league. That's why they're the only teams that make money, and they should be the standard that every other team wants to be. I don't care about American football. I only watch the Canadian variant. And with this Americanization, I'm seriously considering dropping my season ticket. As much as it pains me to say it, the 112th Grey Cup will probably be the last CFL game I ever attend. A game that held so much excitement for me, as it was the first Grey Cup I'm ever going to, has a much more somber feeling around it now. And I'll always bleed blue and gold. I'll always love the Bombers, but I don't like the changes. And unfortunately, it just might be a little too much for me. Because the league survives the unsurvivable, it seems. It should have been dead in the 90s. But because it had competent leadership under then Commissioner Larry Smith, and as strange as it sounds, the radically Canadian stuff, propelled the league, and it left it in a better place than what it was prior. Now, by trying to copy the NFL, they run the risk of going down the route that every other league that's copied it faces. Almost certain deaths. Look at the AAF, look at the XFL, USFL. They don't last. And I'm worried with the CFL becoming more Americanized, that they'll follow the same path. Also, in 2025 Canada, it may not be the smartest move to Americanize with anti-US sentiment being high. And in years that's so rah-rah Canada, the CFL had a golden opportunity to market itself as Canada's game, and in my opinion, they really haven't. It's just yet another marketing blunder. Ultimately, I worry about the future of the sport of Canadian football. I worry about the high school programs that may not be able to afford these changes. Because let's be real, most Canadian high schools probably don't have a lot of money for the football program. And these changes will cost. Either the professional clubs are going to cover it, not gonna happen. The schools that can't afford to cover it aren't gonna pay for everyone else's changes. So that's gonna leave the schools holding the bag, and I have a bad feeling that a lot of them will just deem it too much of a waste and shut the programs down. And that's a damn shame, because I grew up watching the CFL. I watched it for over a decade before I played my first ever down of Canadian rules high school football. And you know, when I finally stepped on the field after over a decade of idolizing players, I felt a sense of pride in myself. And now, a market that the league desperately wants, high school age kids, won't have the same attachment to the Canadian game because they can't watch the rules anymore with these changes. So they'll be stuck playing a completely foreign game. I'm worried that the sport of Canadian football will be yet another Canadian icon that crumbles because of mismanagement. I have a bad feeling that it's gonna collapse like Eaton's did and like Hudson's Bay did. I want to reach out to all the CFL fans out there. Every Lions fan, Stampeders fan, Elks/Eskimos fans, Rough Rider fans, Blue Bomber fans, Argos fans, Tiger Cat fans, Red Blacks fans, and Alouettes fans, and fans of the league in general to stand up and protect the game we love, protect our league, because it's not the Commissioner's League to ruin, and we're going to fight for this league because we know it's worth saving. These changes aren't official yet. If we get our voices out there, if we sign the petitions, we can save our league. Let's put our rivalries aside and let's stand up as Team CFL. In my description, I'm putting the link to the petition that fights against these changes. I know, we will be heard. We are stronger together than we are apart. Save the 55, keep Canadian ball Canadian, and let's go, we have a league to save. CFL forever.